again, and welcome everyone to Solar Alberta's 2025 Solar Show, our 11th annual. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday afternoon. Today's session is called Solar on Farms in Alberta. Please note that we have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. You can turn the captioning on in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be recording the session and making it available on our website and YouTube channel following the show. My name is Pri Kang, and I'm the president of the board of directors at Solar Alberta. I would like to take a minute to acknowledge that I'm hosting you today and working day to day from Amuskowitchi Waskahegan, also known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is located on Treaty 6 territory and the homelands of the Métis Nation. Treaty 6 territory is a traditional gathering place and home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Papachase, Nehewaka Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux. Nations whose ancestors have cared for and nurtured these lands since time immemorial. We were delighted to have so many people register for this week and for this event. To start, we would like to thank Lakeland College for sponsoring this exciting session today. We are happy and grateful to have them as our sponsor. Today, we will be hearing from Heather McKenzie and Paul McLaughlin. Following the presentations, there will be a question and answer period in which you can all participate. We will be using the Zoom Q&A for questions rather than the chat box, so please take a second to locate that Q&A section and that Q&A box, and you can ask your questions there. Also, please click on the thumbs up symbols to upvote questions if you like. The entire session will wrap up in an hour. To begin, I would like to encourage you all to check out our online trade show. Please click on the link in the chat to view 10 exhibitor booths, which include a listing of key solar-related services, contact information, and video introductions. Before we move forward, we are going to do a quick poll to get a sense of who we have joining us today. Please take a minute to answer the question popping up on your screen now. While some are still doing the poll, I encourage you to also take a minute to include your name, land acknowledgement, and any other contact information you feel comfortable sharing in the chat or throughout the event, so that others can look you up on LinkedIn and you can stay connected. Awesome. Taking a look at the poll, many of us are solar or solar-related industry professionals, and that's where a large amount, and solar curious, so those who are contemplating adopting solar for their home or business. That's great, and you can see that there's a range of different audiences today. And now to share just a little about who we are. Solar Alberta is now in its 34th year of operation. We are a not-for-profit society that is dedicated to accelerating Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. We do so by advocating, educating, and serving as an industry and community hub for solar energy. Our membership is made up of over 220 individuals and over 160 businesses. We have also over 31,000 followers on our online communities. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory through our website. In this way, we act as a bridge for installers, suppliers, and other solar-related businesses to connect with their members, customers, and clients. Our directory gets over 48,000 hits each year. You can see a link to that in the chat. Once again, we are offering affordable courses for solar industry professionals or those looking to transition into the solar sector. Most of our courses are online on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. First up is Solar PV Systems Design and Modeling, which starts Tuesday, February 11th. On the first weekend in April, we are also offering an in-person course in Calgary, Solar PV Systems Commissioning, Operations, and Maintenance. And we are once again offering our solar training course bundle. This bundle includes 3 of our technical courses at a discounted rate. On-demand recordings of our courses are also available for sale alongside our paid workshops in the solar training video section of our website. In addition to our courses and the solar show, we run our free solar seminar series and a number of in-person and online networking events each year. Our next solar series session is Alberta Agrivoltaics 101, Solar and Farms Unite. It will take place on March 20th at noon. Registration for the seminar can be completed through the link in the chat. We are popping a link for that for our March 11th Solar Women's Gathering as well. As mentioned before, we also advocate for solar. We are currently rising up for renewables. We have free lawn signs available for pickup in 10 municipalities and offer free delivery in 8 municipalities around Alberta. We also have template letters for you to use on our website asking the government of Alberta to eliminate the new and discriminatory buffer zones they have established for renewable energy. That link also found in the chat, and you can also make a free sign order and find those templates today. If you are all not already a Solar Alberta member, I encourage you to join. Individual memberships are typically $35, but are on sale this week for 20% off. They can be purchased at the link in the chat. If you are looking to support the work that we are doing at Solar Alberta in additional ways, please consider volunteering or donating. On the topic of volunteering, we have one position coming available on our board. This position will be filled at our May 7th AGM. If you're interested in becoming a part of Solar Alberta's board, use the link in the chat to apply before March 16th. With your help, we are recognizing long-time dedicated contributors to solar in Alberta by gifting them a free lifetime Solar Alberta membership. If you are currently a Solar Alberta member and you know someone who has contributed significantly to the organization or the solar sector in Alberta as a whole, please consider nominating them for this award. You can find the link in the chat for the nomination. We will accept nominations until April 16th, and the award recipients will be announced at our AGM. Finally, we ask that you please consider participating in our 50/50 raffle, which is over $2,400. Ticket sales end this Friday at the end of this session, and this is the last show of the solar session, so we'll be doing a draw shortly after. Without further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to give another shout out to Lakeland College for sponsoring this session. And now I'm delighted to get this session underway by introducing our speakers, Heather McKenzie and Paul McLaughlin. Heather is the Executive Director of Solar Alberta, where she and her team are working hard to accelerate Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. She is a seasoned leader, community organizer, and green business advocate. Prior to becoming the Executive Director of Solar Alberta, she worked as a government relations professional, ran her own business, and served as an elected trustee on the Edmonton Public School Board. She is in the midst of completing a master's in public administration, has a master's in international development, and has undergraduate degrees in both sociology and history. She believes investing in solar is a very concrete way that everyday Albertans can take meaningful action on climate change. Paul is the former president of Rural Municipalities of Alberta. In November 2020, he is the Reeve of Ponoka County, currently serving in his 5th term on council. Paul McLaughlin's professional background is multifaceted. He's a field biologist, environmental scientist, works in public consultation and communications, and is also a resource and conservation management specialist. His consulting business is in the area of project management, multi-stakeholder programs, ecological and indigenous and socioeconomic pre-development assessment, and public consultations for resource and energy projects. He holds an MBA in finance with the University of Leicester, where he researched the barriers and motives of renewable investment of households in rural Alberta. Thank you both for joining us today. Heather, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Preet. I'm just going to get my screen share going here. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Solar on Farms in Alberta. In this presentation, I'm going to provide a brief overview to set the stage for Paul's story about solar on his farm. And I'm going to tell you about some of the financial incentives that are available to farmers today as well. To begin, there are a wide variety of solar projects taking shape on farms around the world today. Solar is going up above grapes, potatoes, and other fruits and veggies. Solar is also being hung above or installed in rows along grain fields. Some farmers are using solar arrays to directly supply the electricity to the pumps associated with their irrigation systems. or to otherwise offset the power used for irrigation. And in Alberta, you might not be surprised to see sheep grazing around our solar farms. In fact, on some farms, just like on some car dealerships in Alberta, solar is actually being used to protect, in this case, sheep, cows, and other animals from hail and other increasingly hostile weather patterns. Alberta farmers also have a lot of solar on their homes and barn roofs. A lot, that is, compared to farmers in other provinces. As you know, there's always room to grow, and that is why we're here today. Did you know the first net zero egg barn in Alberta was launched almost 10 years ago in 2016? Here it is, the Brant Hutterite Colony Egg Barn. I was very fortunate to be there when it launched, and that was part of what inspired my transition into the solar sector. So there are essentially two broad categories of solar on farms. The category you have likely been reading a lot about in the news over the past few years is called utility scale solar, commonly referred to as a solar farm or a solar power plant. Those installations have system sizes of over 5 megawatts. They are run primarily to put power on the grid and to make money. They are increasingly being combined with crops and livestock in a system called agrivoltaics. As you may recall, in the intro slide deck, we are actually hosting a free virtual seminar specifically about that topic on March 20th over the lunch hour. So that won't be the focus of our session today. The category of solar on farms that we are going to talk about today is solar on farmhouses or farm businesses. This is called microgeneration. So just like the system on the Brant Hutterite colony, these are systems that are under 5 megawatts and that are primarily meant to provide enough electricity to power your home or business and reduce your electricity bills. For some farmers, their micro system might not look very micro because their operations are so big and their electricity use is so significant. Those large microgeneration systems still fall under the microgeneration regulation in Alberta. However, because they are under 5 megawatts, in these cases, the solar installer, must match the size of your array to be the same size or smaller than that which would offset your typical electricity usage over the course of a year. That is in keeping with the Alberta microgeneration regulation, which we have a free webinar about on our YouTube channel. That said, with respect to system sizing for farms, there was a big win at the Alberta Utilities Commission, which is also called the AUC, in 2023. In short, the AUC decided that microgeneration regulations could be interpreted quite broadly by wire providers like Fortis or ATCO, and that 5-year averages for utility use could, though may not always, be considered in system sizing, if that average would lead to a more accurate estimate of future use. This is particularly important for farming operations, as their electricity usage can be extremely variable with drought and other causes. This decision was based on a farm in Paradise Valley, Alberta, that had experienced drought in some years and not in others. The drought dramatically changed their electricity use patterns over the course of a few years, right before they were about to get solar. They were permitted by the AUC to connect a 249 kilowatt array to the grid. Please note that it is unlikely you could get away with a 5-year average for something like your farmhouse, though, as that would not have as much variability as the farming operations. Despite this more flexible allowance for sizing on some farms with inconsistent electricity use patterns, I've spoken with a number of farmers who are upset that they can't produce more electricity than they consume over the course of a year in general. They want to install the maximum system size that they can afford, and they want to sell electricity back to the grid to make money like a big solar farm can. They see this as a business diversification strategy. If this is a concern of yours, please be aware that Alberta has a small-scale generation regulation that is intended to facilitate this type of money-making process. We have a webinar about that regulation on our YouTube channel as well. In the future, there may also come to be yet another category of solar on farms. In addition to microgeneration and utility scale solar projects in Alberta, the community solar space is emerging. Community generation is where a group of people come together and invest in a solar development that is not on their own property. A number of cooperatives, community leagues, and Indigenous nations are leading the way with community generation in Alberta. Here is the Métis Crossing Solar Farm, a 4.86 megawatt community solar installation, which was a collaboration between the Métis Nation of Alberta, the town of Smoky Lake, and Smoky Lake County. They decided to place it on unused farmland, established a community benefit agreement, and used the small-scale generation regulation in the process. While community generation is still in its early stages in Alberta, it has the potential to allow apartment dwellers, renters, and others who don't have a solar appropriate roof an opportunity to contribute to solar production in Alberta and experience the associated financial benefits. We have numerous free webinars about community generation that you can find on our YouTube channel. We also have a few cooperative members who are actively looking for space to lease for community solar projects. Our hope is that farmers who have a bit of unused land will start to post that space for lease on the RFP section of our website. And then our co-op members could pitch those farmers a lease arrangement for the purpose of community solar. Small bits of brownfield or unused roof space might not be of interest to a mega solar farm developer, but they could still be super helpful for the right investors. Now I'm going to go through this slide pretty quickly here because it is in our Solar 101 presentation, but in case any of you missed that one slide, let's turn to a quick overview of how solar generation works on a typical home or business in Alberta. Imagine this is your farm. First, sunlight hits the solar modules that are installed on your roof, indicated by number 1. In the Northern Hemisphere, south-facing roofs get the best sun, flat roofs are fine, east-west facing, those work all right too. Just don't have a north-facing roof ideally. The PV modules convert sunlight into DC or direct current electricity. That electricity travels to the inverter, indicated by number 2, which converts the DC electricity into the AC or alternating current electricity that your home or business uses. This electricity is then fed into your business or home's main electrical panel, showed by number 3. From here, the electricity generated by the solar system can go in one of 2 directions. When you install solar, you're going to get a bidirectional meter, shown by number 4. It's going to keep track of the electricity taken from the grid, as well as the electricity put onto the grid. If your farm is not consuming all of the electricity that your installation is generating, then the extra electricity can go back to the main power grid, indicated by number 6, because it isn't being used by the farm. That will show up as a credit on your electricity bill. If your house is using a lot of electricity when your installation is generating, then the electricity from the solar system will be used to power anything that is using electricity on your farm at that point first, before sending anything to the grid. Number 5 indicates appliances, including electric vehicles, something that's using what you're generating on your roof. Since this energy is coming directly from your solar system rather than the grid, the electricity grid, you aren't being charged for that electricity. In Alberta, farms with solar energy will almost always remain connected to the utility grid. This allows the grid to serve as an auxiliary electricity source that will supply the farm with electricity when it needs more power than the system produces, for instance, at night or when it's cloudy or during the dark winter months. This grid connection is also important for ensuring a reliable electricity supply. The home's connection to the grid is what enables the homeowner to generate credits in the summer when they are producing more electricity than they need. My last slide before I turn things over to Paul. Now that you have a bit of the context to understand Paul's story, I just want to touch briefly on the financial incentives available today before turning over the mic. Although an installation can be costly, it will of course pay for itself over a number of years, and there are a number of incentives available to help. First, in many municipalities around Alberta, SEEP is being implemented. SEEP stands for the Clean Energy Improvement Program. It's Alberta's version of a program that is often called PACE in other jurisdictions. It's a financing approach that allows for solar or energy efficiency upgrades to be financed through property taxes, have the costs of the upgrade tied to the property rather than the property owner. If a municipality has SEEP financing in place, then sometimes you don't need to put any money down. That depends on your municipality. And of course, it's often paid back over a 20-year period with low interest rates. Each municipality is running the program a little bit differently. Currently, only the City of Edmonton and Sturgeon County have commercial SEEP programs for businesses, but the City of Grand Prairie and others might be joining soon, especially if you ask for it. So you want to ask for that commercial SEEP program if you want this type of low interest financing for your farm. You can check out myseep.ca for more information about this new program and to see where your municipality is at in the SEEP adoption process. Additionally, there is the new Canadian Clean Technology Investment Tax Credit that the CRA and NRCan are mutually responsible for. This is a 30% refundable tax credit for farmers who install solar. Lastly, if you have an agricultural facility with the North American Industry Classification Code of 11, you can likely qualify for a new grant program being run by Emissions Reduction Alberta called the Strategic Energy Management for Industry Program, or SEMI. We hosted a webinar about it on Wednesday, and that's going to be up on our YouTube channel as soon as we get it edited. So you can learn more about that grant for 20% off, I should say up to 20% off your solar project at eralberta.ca. To be frank, I started at solar about 5 years ago, and this is the most government support that we've seen for farms in a number of years. So now would be a great time to check out the directory on our website, request some quotes from our amazing members, many of whom are super experienced in installing commercial solar arrays. Now I'm very excited to turn the mic over to Paul for him to tell us his solar story, which has been ongoing for a very long time. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul, and I'll see you all in the Q&A after.
Perfect. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I'm going to sound like an old guy when I'm doing this because I'm going to tell a story that's about 20 years old. So, and you can see my slide, I hope. So, dollars and cents. These sessions are actually. I'll tell you. I'll tell you a cool story because Alberta Solar has been around for a long time. So I think about 20 years ago, this is before I installed solar, I'd gone to it was someone's farm, and they must have been there. It was basically me trying to get into understanding more about solar. So I bought an LED light. It was my first LED light 20 years ago. So you can imagine what 20 years technology is. And this thing is like so low producing, and it's not a great light, but I actually use it. I still use it to this day. So it's 20 years old. I still use it this day, and I use it in a place that doesn't require a lot of light. So, you know, Alberta Solar was cool before and high tech before everybody else. Glad to be here today. Thank you for Lakeland for sponsoring. I get pretty excited about this topic. If they're actually trying to caption me, I talk really fast. I swear I must be a auctioneer. But my presentation, I'm going to pare it down. I really like answering questions. As was said, I'm a politician. I just love answering questions. So my hope is to not really sit here, be talking head. I really want to dig down deep and get some questions. And what my presentation is, I actually reversed it because, you know, everybody tries to do the build up. So I've actually completely inverted my presentation with the takeaways first, and then I'm going to go and tell my story. So my hope here is to at the very least walk you on this journey. And I'm just having trouble advancing my slides. So we'll just see if I can get it to go forward. There we go. And so the first thing, this is your to-do list, you know, educate yourself. And I think everybody that's here today, and I think at the session, and Alberta Solar definitely has those pieces. There's no single silver bullet, and renewable can't solve all the world's problems. And I think that really there's some opportunities here for you to actually go down a path of energy efficiency. If you had $1 to spend, spending on efficiency first and then looking at the other journeys is something I'm going to talk a little bit about. Energy hogs, I think, are something important. Definitely, having that renewable conversation, but you're dropping power somewhere else. Now, anybody that's on a farm, you folks know, I bought my farm and I have household wire under the ground at one time. So literally, it wasn't outdoor grade wire. It was farmer special, and in many ways, a lot of folks can be wasting power even by abandoned lines in their property that's still generating power. So understanding how you're using power, I think, is important. And that's an important part of the journey that I've been on. I don't even monitor anything anymore. I've been actually doing this for so long that I know when I'm making power. And I think that, if you've done something, try to get credit for it. And I think there's some talk about some funding opportunities. I would stay away from micro wind. I do have micro wind generation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in my story. It is cool. Trust me. I think it's awesome. But it's a tricky beast, and it can make your neighbors angry, and my wife hates it. So I still have it, but she talks about it a lot. Definitely be aware of the Canadian Electric Code. You've got some great installers here. These folks know what they're doing. Please respect the safety. This is not a toy. This isn't a solar panel slapped on an RV. This is death-producing power and definitely a risk. So it needs to be respected and treated properly. Now, and here's the fact, folks, and this is why I think the on-farm conversation is so significant. I use more power than an individual does, because any of you folks that live on a farm, you've got waters, you've got pumps, and all the ancillary pieces. I use a lot of power. I run a very efficient household in multiple buildings, but I still consume a lot of energy, which makes me the ideal person for looking at renewable. And I think that really this idea of energy independence, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my thesis, because I think even you folks that are on the retail side or making your decisions, this energy independence is really cool. And I'll tell you why. I've had solar panels for 18 years. They paid for themselves already. That is really cool, that when the sun shines, I knocked the snow off them this morning, and even in a cold day like today, I'm still making power. And that is just awesome. And I know how it works, and I still think it's awesome. So, and I think there's one of the challenges that are out there is poor information, misinformation, and there's some politics tied to this. People saying, "Oh, it's a scam," and rest assured, it is an effective way to create power. The physics have been around for a long time. It's some of the technology. There's solar panels that have been installed since for about 80 years, and they're still functioning, even though they're low producing. So this is something that I think is incredible. The science works, the economics work, and I think it's important. So I hope really, really what the key thing here is that if this is something, if you've been kicking tires, and I looked in some of the folks that are there, if you've been kicking tires, really there's a call to action here. I think there's an opportunity. We know what the chaos in the world it is right now as it relates to trade and otherwise. This is a way for you to actually do some self-generation, actually fix your costs, and actually pre-buy your power in many ways for the future as well. And it works. My peak production, and any of you folks that have installations, my peak production is March and October. People are surprised by that. They think, oh, geez, it's the middle of summer. It's like, you know what? A cold, sunny day in Alberta is better than a rainy day in BC. And no offense to anybody from BC, but I'll tell you, Alberta's got a pretty amazing opportunity. And really, from the farm standpoint, and this is the message, is that I have a lot of land relative to other people. I have a lot of land that isn't in agricultural production. It could be considered brownfield or non-productive. And having that land, I can create a certain level of energy self-sufficiency. There is some politics tied to overproduction, and I can talk at length about what the problems are. I don't believe, I think you actually should get paid more than retail. I think there's some pieces of that can still be fixed. There's been some wins for microgeneration, but I think that the opportunity is here, and I hope my presentation will bring you to a call to action. So my journeys, what did I learn? I'm going to really talk fast and get this over with, because again, I like asking questions, but I do want to, I wish someone had told me a few things, and I think that's what I'm going to try to share with you, because I might have made some mistakes. I made some things that I probably should have done differently, and at the same time, I'm so glad I did it. I think the best time to do it was yesterday, and I think I will talk a little bit about the results of my thesis, but again, I think actually I'll provide to you guys because I think it's really important. And I'm going to talk a little bit about installation and some of the woes with it. I think people have been talking about barn installations. I've got friends with barn installations. You're starting to see larger operations. I do work in the macro space, but I do have lots of friends that are micro. When I first was installed 18 years ago, there was 106 people that had renewables in the province, and 6 of us had wind power. So there wasn't a lot of us. So my wife and I's journey is we live in a cow pasture, and we raise we're hay growers. We grow hay, and we grow hay for the equine market. And anybody that knows what horse people are like, I have to grow a very high quality hay for horse people. So and so that's a very finicky market. So I actually grow it, and I actually do square bales, which means if everything works great, I'm a brilliant farmer, and if things break down, I can't put my arms over my head for about a month. And anybody who knows what I'm talking about knows what I'm talking about. And so we actually had we built an office on our farm. My base. I was living in the basement. Literally, the cat was using the litter box in the same room as me, and that's not cool. And so I wanted to build this office, and on my farm, I'm an environmental scientist, as was said previous. But you know what? I was raised by a Scottish accountant. My dad is a very frugal man, and I think that he's always in my head, and not in my head. He talks to me on a regular basis. Why are you doing that? And all he's saying is that, geez, you're building this office. Like, look at you with all your money, and why are you wasting money? So I had this space that wasn't going to be used all the time. I couldn't almost live with myself heating 2 buildings, let alone my agricultural buildings. So I really had to look at what I wanted to create and how I wanted to do this. So I had some needs. I wanted to build this office. I wanted to build it as efficiently as possible, but at the same time, I wanted to see if I could make this a net positive, or at least a net zero. So, I need to make sure that it was energy efficient. I need to make sure it produced its own energy. I had to look at some passive solar, and then I wanted to be able to feed that surplus power to the rest of the farm. And again, no matter what, I'm a larger user than your typical urban dweller, just because of the facilities I have. So, really what I had to do, and I think the important thing was I had to see what this was going to be, what I have to do, what was going to use the power, how was I going to install it, how to be efficient, how to best use my land as possible. And again, if you're not conserving, you're wasting power. So energy efficiency is so important. The technology's advanced so far. That kind of crappy LED light, which I still think is pretty cool from 20 years ago, all you folks know the technology now has improved, and I think it's quite significant. So, really, I wanted to make my house as energy efficient as possible. Again, using the best windows, doing all those key things. And then once I went through this effort, I know I could live with my dad's voice in my head. Actually, not. And one thing about my dad is, so my dad kept the house at 18 degrees Celsius. Anybody knows this when growing up? Because money was flying out the door. And now when I go visit him, it's 23 Celsius in his house. So the guy, and I even confronted him. I said, "You froze us as kids." And he goes, "Well, I saved all that money and now I'm spending it, so you don't get it." So, and so we wanted to build this building. And I know this talk isn't about construction, but again, going back to that energy efficiency conversation, is that there's some technology and there's some things that we can do in building new that I think is important. I've looked at SIP straw bale. We've got some folks in the Rimbey area that have actually grow straw bales and do phenomenal straw bales for that. But we were actually going to look at an enhanced standard stick production. So I've actually done our building was actually built 2x6 staggered stud. So we actually built a wall within a wall. And then we actually insulated it so we wouldn't have any thermal bridging. So super energy efficient space. Actually, it was so energy efficient when we built it before we actually put the heating system in and the solar, that the halogen lights actually heated the building for the first couple of months. So we built this on my farm. This is my office, and this is where we run the farm operations as well as our businesses. And the cool feature of here is that that's actually a solar wall, so that actually heats the building in the wintertime. And it's made by beer cans from Newfoundland. Anybody that knows the can Solaire, but it uses 15 watts of power, equates an equivalent of about 2,000 watts. So that's in my wife's office, and she actually complains on being hot all the time, which doesn't really is something that normally doesn't happen. I went for a ground mount system, and the reason why is I wanted to knock the snow off. I wanted to make sure I had the ability to keep, and I used 2 sun angles. I use favorite angle in the summertime and favorite angle in the wintertime. And any of you installers know that. My wires are neater now, just to be clear. Just that was a little bit early on. But again, these solar panels now, it's incredible the efficiency. The solar hot air and the passive solar design. If you notice, the windows are very high to the soffits. And that again is to limit the heat gain in the summertime and then to gain as much heat as possible in the wintertime. And it's extremely effective too as well. And I think that one of the key things is that this is land that wasn't doing anything. It was a piece of land. It was easy to install. I did a ground mount. I had to actually I triple ground it, but it was not that hard to do in the space. And in fact, it's even cheaper to do now than it was when I did it. And I think that it's about an eighth of the footprint now for the equivalent production. And at the same time, the technology's gotten so much better. So the efficiency is there. And again, these are 18-year-old solar panels. Now I do have wind, which I think is something that not a lot of folks have. A lot of people ask me about wind. It is pretty cool because obviously it blows at night, and when it makes power, it makes a crap load of power. I'll be honest with you. I can make 3 days of power in one shot. It does make noise, obviously. It's 90 feet tall. The company that built this is bankrupt, but started back up again. I just was given some notice. So this wind turbine is 19 years old. It's getting close to its effective life. It still works. I can barely communicate it. I had to use a DOS program to communicate with it 20 years ago, Windows 2.0, I think it was. So it's still working. It's still creating power, and that's quite significant. So I think I can get this video to start. I'm not sure. I'm going to see. Sometimes it doesn't work, but yeah. So is that working for you guys? I don't know if it's working for you. And so I just want to, and those chickens are perfectly fine. A lot of people are worried about animals near wind turbines, but they seem fine. They're working through it. So again, this is something I just always people like to hear about the wind turbine. You know, the best thing about the wind turbine, it's easy to find my place. I'm the guy with the wind turbine. So everybody's like, oh, I know where your place is. I'm the wind turbine guy. And I think that one of the biggest messages I can give you folks is that you need to really be educated. Again, using good installers. Alberta Solar's got all of this information. Please educate yourself, because I think you can prevent making some mistakes. When I was installing my system, it was a 90-page agreement between me and my service provider, which was Equus at the time, or which is Equus still to this day. And now we've actually centered it down to quite, it's probably, I think it's 5 pages now, I think the normal agreement. I do have visual open circuits. I've created the system that's safe. Any of your installers know that, but grounding, these, you need to be extremely safe. I think talking about, this volatile weather-based future that we're having, more intense storms, etc., we need to make sure that we're being really safe and making sure that the folks working on the lines are safe, as well as your family safe too as well. Really, again, energy efficiency is important. This is the old system I had, F4G, but knowing the power you use, I think, is something that, please, if you can walk out of this session, if you do not have renewables, get to know your power, get to know yourself, get to know what you're using, especially from the farm standpoint. There's probably some equipment you can update. Someone's always got that old fridge that could be sucking power. That's definitely time that you should spend, and I think there's some opportunities there. And I think that the business case, and I'll talk a little bit about what my MBA is about, is the business case is there. I mean, the fact is you can have a fixed cost of power for a significant period of time. And that being said, really high users, the economics make sense very quickly. You can have a 10 to 12 year payback on this investment. Now, you folks know the volatility we have in this world right now. And the other thing is from a production standpoint, one of my highest bills, even with renewables in place, the fact that my business is net positive and I do have surplus power, my power bill is still one of my highest bills. And you folks are probably in the same place I am. And it's gotten extremely expensive in the last little while. Alberta has got some of the highest power prices from a utility standpoint. Really, there's an opportunity here too as well, I think, for that investment standpoint. And that business case, I think, can be made quite simply. And I think it's important. And when was the best time to do this? The reality is yesterday and now. I think that I would definitely say right now, my wife and I are expanding our system. We're at a stage now where I want to make sure that we're successive, but at the same time, I'm still having equivalent production to this date. Now, I'm going to talk really quickly about my thesis, only really, really fast, although I think it was super cool. And really what my thesis was about was looking at what was the limits to people investing in renewable. Now, this was done in 2016, so it's a little old, and it was before some of the shifting going on around, but I think it's really, really important messaging. that I think is important for you, even as an individual or someone for Alberta Solar to make the decision, is that I really thought what was driving this was environmental concern. I thought people would invest in renewable because one of the comments, this is a way to fight climate change, and most of them just weren't really that concerned about it. Now, again, this is 2016. It was a while ago, but definitely higher market prices was a driver for folks. And I it became something that's important. But this trend really, again, I thought this was a statement for environmental, and really, I thought it was also people thought it was cool. I thought, well, good technology, and the people I surveyed, again, these are rural folks that was surveyed in my thesis, 300 folks from border to border to border, and they really, the technology, they just didn't think it was that cool. But I'll tell you, the one thing that dominated was offsetting the monopolization of power companies. And no offense to any power companies in the room, but they felt that really that autarky, that independence, that power independence, I want to be energy independent. People were willing to invest. They were willing to invest for energy independence. They're willing to part with up to $10,000 out of their pocket with no incentives. I'm talking just, what are you willing to pay to become mostly energy independent? And people were willing to actually make that investment. And I think that one of the messages here, I think, to wrap up before we start going to questions, is that you have the space, you have the high power use as someone that's in rural. On-farm solar makes complete sense from an economic standpoint. The fact that you can fix your power, the economics work at the back end. And now we're at a stage where actually renewable installations on your farm actually add value to your farm. Back in the day, my bank was not happy with me. My insurance company was not happy with me, but we've evolved so much. And we're in such a great space that I think that this opportunity, I think, is something that can lock onto you. So good luck to the installers. I think that you folks really need to see your key messaging. I talk to people on a regular basis that are interested in investing in solar. I think if you have the land, if you have the ability, if you have the rooftop, I think it's important. And before we just go to the questions, I'll make my one final statement, because I think we've talked a little bit about utility grade solar. It's gotten a little political in this province and will continue to be so. But I think that one of the things that you folks should recognize, that distributed generation and this ability for you to create more power and independent power distributed throughout this province will allow us to actually take on the next 50 years. It'll give us the ability for the transition to transportation, electrical driven transportation. It'll allow us to take on this uncertain future as it relates to climate change, a hotter, drier future. At the same time, it will allow us to actually make us what we continue to be, is an economic powerhouse in North America. The more energy that you can generate within the province of Alberta, that you're not using your own energy, that being using non-renewables, and exporting non-renewables to other marketplaces that aren't at the same transition stage, is a tremendous opportunity from a trade standpoint. It can deal with some of the politics you're dealing with right now, and I think it's a tremendous opportunity. So with that, let's open up the gates for question and answer, if that sounds fair. I tried to keep it at 13 minutes. I went like 16-ish, sorry, but I
No
get chatty.
worries. That was very amazing and interesting. Thank you for sharing your experience, Paul. You really took us through your thought process and overviewed the importance of energy efficient farms and how solar can fit into achieving energy independence. Awesome. You also really highlighted safety. I love that. Okay, audience, if you have any questions, please use the question and answer section in the Zoom toolbar. I see that Ed has a question here. Does your windmill power produce AC or DC power? If AC, where do you get your inverter?
So this is actually a wind turbine that isn't actually being produced anymore. It actually has an inverter built into the head, so way up at 100 feet tall. My inverter's up there, so it actually goes DC directly into AC at the head. There was a retrofit, so when it was going to break down, it's still working. So the thing is still working. But I had an opportunity to actually have an inverter on the ground, and then I could actually translate it and basically have DC and then invert it on the ground. So it is, I'll be honest with you, people are asking about it. So wind is kind of cool. if you got the ability to put it in, it makes like a serious amount of power. Like I'm telling you, when it is like 25, and wind is logarithmic. So when it's really windy, like it does turn itself off when it's going hard, because it's not going to go high RPM to blow itself up. And I have horses, and my wife, actually, I think she likes the horses more than she likes me. She won't tell you that in person, but she has that look. And so she says if these fall on her horses, she'll kill me. So really really the tower safety thing is important. But we've managed to. There is enough concrete underneath that tower that I have there. It will become an archaeological site in the future, and they'll try to understand what were they doing here. It must be a monument to something because there is a serious amount of concrete in the bottom of that thing. But it's a great technology. There's really small micro out there right now that'd be pretty effective. They do take wear and tear though. They're mechanical, remember. And the best thing about solar is that it's not mechanical. It just every day the turtle versus the hare. Wind is the turtle, or wind is the hare, and solar's the turtle, and the turtle won in the race, I think, if I remember the story right.
I like
Yeah, it
that.
sure doesn't need a lot of maintenance. I noticed that on your slide about the mechanical piece and all the maintenance. That's one really nice thing about solar. Having had solar now for about 5 years myself, I'm amazed that we haven't had to touch it. So that's kind of a dream.
Thanks. Thanks for answering that question. All right. Anonymous attendee asks, for solar installations on farms, would you recommend ground mounts over roof mounts or vice versa?
Well, I talked to a lot of firefighters, and no offense to anybody here that does do. They say please do ground mounts. They're like, because when you're fighting a house fire, the first thing you do is break into the roof, and like it's just we have volunteer firefighters in my county, and I'm not discounting that roof. The fact is that you've got the space. Ground mount is wonderful. I can knock the snow off of it. I can keep it in a good spot. It produces year round in that situation. If you've got the space, ground mount I would say is the best. But at the same time, trees grow and comes with other perspective. And you know what? Do the best of both. And my wife and I are actually going to do a partial roof mount actually as our next installation. So we're going to add another 5 kilowatts, and I'd love to add another 30 kilowatts. Hint, hint. But I don't use that much power. But Heather, we're going to advocate and change those rules. We'll work together.
We're working on it. Yeah, I will say that most of our installers can do a roof mount cheaper than a ground mount because essentially what you're not paying for is the mount. So if you're doing a ground mount, you're going to pay extra for the mount because you're not able to use the roof as the mount. However, I have known that some farmers tend to be fairly handy, and sometimes they can make their own mount. So if you're thinking about making your own mount, then you should probably look at our Solar Ready design seminar because you are going to need to support 3 pounds per square foot is sort of the customary amount. And so, yeah, it's interesting because it can be an affordability issue, but I also understand if your system is big enough, then ground mount might be the cheaper option because you probably don't even have enough roof a space to offset your electricity use. So I've certainly seen both. In the city, generally, they'll go with the roof mount because there's not enough ground space, like you said, Paul. You've got the space on the farm, so sometimes you want to use it. But yeah, there are extra costs associated with the mount. And unfortunately, those are often more fixed, is my understanding. Like mount costs are metals, they're not electronics. So, you don't see the same cost curve coming down with the mount that you would see with the electronic device. And so there are definitely some fixed costs there that are not going to be coming down anytime soon. So it was neat to see your own. Did you make your mount yourself?
Yeah, so we did screw piles and the whole works. And that's the thing about farm people. We love digging holes.
Yeah.
Like I'm like totally into digging holes, and like I
Yeah,
love digging holes.
it's a do-it-yourself approach, and I respect that. And actually, that was, as you mentioned, that was how Solar Alberta started 34 years ago. Do-it-yourselfers. That was where it was at. So, definitely heard of farmers or even just acreage owners who enjoy doing some of that work, and some of them can also get some coaching and design from a solar installer before they go ahead and put all that work in. So you can contract out the design work to a professional, and then at least you know what the heck you're doing before you get started. So there's all sorts of options. And actually, in our directory, we do have solar installers, but we also have a number of consultants in our directory, a number of whom are designers who could probably help out with something like that.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. There's another question here. You've mentioned the political and messaging struggle around renewables in Alberta. How do you approach these discussions when things can become so polarized? What do you suggest focusing on in discussions with our neighbors to cut through that and show them the benefits?
Yeah, and you know, again, I'm the Reeve of Pinoka County. I'm a environmental scientist, so a politician, environmental scientist, and so I believe in human-induced climate change. I believe that I don't have a problem with that. If I talk about the causation, that gets polar. Oh, well, you're speaking against oil and gas, etc. But if I talk about really what the core root is that we want the ability for me to create my own power, for you to create your own power, I think is something that's very fascinating to people, not to be beholden to someone else. I think is the opportunity. It's a proven technology. It does work. I can do the math. Anybody here that's probably on this panel, probably 90% of the folks in here know the math. It does work quite effectively. The micro scale works extremely effectively. And I think that, you know, if I stay away from causation conversations, that's where the polarization occurs. But if we talk about energy independence, if we talk about being the ability for us to do our own thing, people support that, and it does resonate right across the board. And I've got, you know, very, very hyper conservative folks that I'm friends with that have renewables, and they love it. And they, you know why they don't love it because they're saving the environment. They love it because they're making their own power. And you know what? If we're getting to the same place, that's fine. And actually, it's interesting because I've had renewables for a long time, and actually, some of my clients are the utility, so major utility industry, and they're always interested in the microgeneration. Even though they deal on the utility side, they're always fascinated by it too. And many of them have made investments too as well. And one of the things, I'll go to the electrification of transportation. If you've never driven an electric car, you need to, because it's the coolest thing in the world. It is awesome. And I think that you need to understand that things have changed, and it's pretty awesome. They banned them from racetracks because of the fire risk, but really what the risk is they can beat every single thing out there other than fuel-driven dragster. So they're pretty amazing.
Yeah, I've had that pleasure for the last few years myself, and it's quite nice. Today I was out there and I said the snow is bad, and I was like, I shall put on snow mode, and I felt like I was, I don't know, some kind of very futuristic driver. It was really awesome. I will say the politics are not, they're not as bad as people think, and I was actually kind of alarmed when the government of Alberta kind of made this into a hyper partisan political issue last year, because um, it hadn't been. When I started at Solar Alberta, I got more calls from rural Alberta. I got more calls from farmers than any other demographic. They're the ones looking for energy independence. They're the ones looking to reduce their utility bills. So I was really caught off guard when all of a sudden the government was saying, "Oh, farmers hate solar." I said, "Really?" Because I talk to them all the time, and I don't think they hate solar. In fact, I think they're leading the way in many respects. So I just caution folks not to buy into that perspective. There's some people who are maybe trying to drive a wedge between us, trying to make us feel like we're more different than we really are. Luckily, I had met Paul before any of that, rhetoric started. And I already knew that there are people like Paul out there who were actually not that different from me just because I live in a city. And I was like, no, I don't believe that we're that different. So that's part of why we wanted to invite Paul back today, because over the last couple of years, things have gotten really tense in the newspapers. They've gotten really tense in the political rhetoric. But everyday Albertans like Paul and like us, we actually see pretty close we're pretty clear together. Like, this is not an issue that has to divide us. And so I'm hoping that this solar show and things like this will bring us back together, because I think some of those wedges that have been driven between us as Albertans are a little bit fake. And they're a little bit like, let's try and create an issue where one doesn't really have to exist. Now, I don't want to say there aren't some issues to discuss, for sure. It's just that we probably all agree on those. For example, when this all started, I was kind of laughing because the perception of solar proponents was that we hated food and food security, and that was what was being put in the in the media. And I was kind of scoffing because our board had recently declared that we have solar guidelines, sort of solar recommendations for solar farm developers, and they clearly state, please don't develop a solar farm on prime farmland. So There was no divide there. You're not going to find any Albertan who says, gosh, we should threaten our local food security. We should probably put solar up on the best farm. Like, that's not an Albertan perspective. Now, there might be a couple folks looking to do that type of development, but they are the anomaly. They're very rare. And most of us value food security. Most of us see space for both and realize that we can have both. We actually don't have to choose. It doesn't have to be an either or. And so, yeah, so I just want to thank you, Paul, for coming today, because I really wanted to bring, the two sides of that coin back together, which is where we were when we first met at our solar show 5 years ago when you joined us. And then there was sort of this wedge driven between these communities. And I feel like we have a lot of work to do to say, no, no, that's a fake wedge. We are actually, we're all okay with where we're headed here, and energy independence, it brings us all together. It unites us all. We all care about that, especially right now with this with the politics internationally. Everybody's saying, "Whoa, energy independence is what we need most of all." So thanks for flagging that today.
Thank you. Have you seen instances of farmers wanting to transition land to solar when it becomes too dry to farm that land?
Yeah, some of the larger utility scale that are going on in southern Alberta are actually being done on marginal farmland. That actually, when I say marginal, I mean seriously marginal. Uh, it- I've done some work in the climate change space, and if you actually look at the data, is all available from every weather station across the province, and you can map it out. A lot of the work that I've done in this province, 2 degrees Celsius running average increase in temperature is occurring probably over about 3/4 of this province right now. In the south, it's even worse. And in fact, southern Alberta is actually showing a temperature regime profile that's close to southern Wyoming right now. Therefore, really, the ability to farm it is starting to be limited. And so what I've actually seen is that there's a few utility grade solar installations in southern Alberta that are actually going on such marginal farmland that the money being used to actually the money being used, or the revenue being used from those installations, is purchasing land in northern Alberta for the purposes of farming. And so that shift is happening. Regardless of what you think, it is happening already. I'm already seeing it again on weather stations across this province, and undeniably the fact that this hotter, drier future is with us. And vegetation takes a little while to show the impacts, or it doesn't, which is the forest fire situation in northern Alberta. But definitely those shifts are already occurring. And you want some proof. There's finally raccoons in Ponoka County. That's my indicator, is there's raccoons in Ponoka County. Ponoka County was too cold for raccoons. They're here now. So there's not lots, just to be clear, but they're here.
And sadly, Paul, we've got ticks in Edmonton now. That was my indicator. I was like, oh my God, what is that? So raccoons in Ponoka County, ticks in Edmonton, things are shifting.
Yeah, that's my bioindicator, raccoons.
I think we might have time for just one more question. Lisa asks, is it worth adding solar to your farm if your farm grain, sorry, is it worth it adding solar to your farm if your farm grain and you separate the rows enough for equipment to pass between the rows, fixed or single tilt axis?
Yeah, definitely the agrivoltaics conversation. I think there's some opportunity there for fixed. One of the problems is a lot of the farm machinery does throw a lot of gravel when it's combining. So some of that combination is a little tricky. That being said, I think that the interspersing and those opportunities, I have this conversation around fixed mount with folks quite a bit, and rotate. If you've got the land, fixed mount is perfectly fine, because having something that's mechanical and rotating again is mechanical. But we're talking about, we got space. That's not our problem. So we can use a fixed mount and a blend of fixed mounts, create the most opportunity. The interspersing of panels and agriculture may need to change some of your operations, but it is totally doable. And there is, on any piece of land, even on my farm, I got good parts and I got bad parts. And installing solar on the parts that aren't necessarily as farmable is a huge opportunity. The other interesting thing in a hotter, drier future, and there's a lot of work being done at the universities on this, is it does provide cooling to the soil solar panels, and actually can become biodiversity sinks, which are co-facilitative to farming too as well. And you probably have seen solar panels and bees campaign that's out there right now. It is very true that you do change that soil temperature, therefore the vegetation temperature, and bees don't like it hot. They like it a little cooler too. So so there's some opportunities between those two as well that I think the future will embrace too as well.
That's great. Okay, well, I think we will end our question and answer session there. Thank you, audience, for all of these amazing questions. And I see that there are a lot of other very amazing questions. So if you would like to reach out to Solar Alberta, I know that we can definitely help try and figure out some of those things that you're asking in there. Once again, I would like to thank our sponsor, Lakeland College, our speakers today, Paul McLaughlin and Heather McKenzie, and all of you for joining us for this session and over the week. You are what makes our community so wonderful. We'll end our 2025 solar show with our 50-50 draw. Heather, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Preet,
Thank
and
you.
everybody for a great session and a great week. It's been a pleasure spending the whole week with y'all. So our 50-50 winner, drum roll please. I don't know how to do that electronically. I'm just clicking the button online here. Our winner is Susan Griesaber Otto and ticket number D-1398. So we will get in touch with our winning 50-50 participant. And thanks everybody again for a wonderful solar show. Really appreciate all of your support. Have a great weekend.